Serious with the lights go on. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll give everyone a couple more minutes, maybe another minute or so. I think the other session beforehand overran even more than ours did, so they're just getting their last coffees, but we'll get started very soon. Thank you. We had the last flurry, so I think let's get started, and people might join us throughout. So hello again, everyone. This is not a time loop. We are moving on to a new session now. I have the pleasure of chairing this one too. This one is looking at synthetic data in particular and trying to pitch it to you all to try and support the data protection officer's perspective on it. It's an area that's becoming increasingly popular, for sure, in terms of implementation and reuse. And I think it's probably fair to say that it's uncovering new areas for risk management, without a doubt. So this session is going to look at the legal position in particular of synthetic data and the ramifications for other areas of activity. And one of the things we're hoping to achieve is not only a sense of positioning with regards to how we treat and deal with synthetic data implementations, but also to manage some expectations around their use and reuse. So this afternoon, we're joined by Winnie Dongbu from My Data Trust, who's going to do a deep dive into some of the regulatory ramifications of synthetic data, as well as for synthetic data. And unfortunately, Jean-Louis Freys was unable to join us at short notice, but not to worry, because we have Peter Singleton with us to go through some of his practical experience on dealing with synthetic data matters, because they've already arisen in our projects in quite an interesting way. So I'm your chair for this afternoon, but as if you were in the last session, I did jump in on a particular point of experience. I too will add some weight to some of our discussions as well, because I lead on work packages around synthetic data production for rare disease cohorts. And that's an area that I do want to try and introduce as well, because we've uncovered some interesting considerations. So there have been some recent publications in this area that I think we'll all find of interest, particularly from the public perspective. But without further ado, I'm going to invite Winnie to join us on the stage, and your presentation should be up momentarily. Thank you. Thank you, Winnie.
Yes. So hello everyone. For those who were not with us yesterday, I'm a data protection lawyer working with health data, but I'm also a PhD student interested in synthetic data and medical research, much more like legal and ethical aspect. I chose this title because as a lawyer, sometimes when we need to apply the right legislations, the right rules, you need to identify and to qualify. When you have something new coming from, like from innovation, you need to be like, okay, what it is, how we can qualify, and in which I would say table we can put this and find the appropriate way to be compliant. And I link my topic with a session I have attended, I think 4 years ago, when Nicholas Fergus, which is kind of interesting, this question said that any new regulations on the data looks GDPR like the sun. They just, circle around, but they don't dare to touch it. And I felt like it was really interesting. So that's why I chose an approach where I will share with you few EU regulations where that identity crisis may cause an issue with compliance, or maybe where we need more clarification. So I will play a bit the bad guy because the good guy is showing the advantages and the potential of sensitive data will not be there, but I count of my co-panelists to show you more about practical cases, scenarios. So I think I already explained a bit about why an identity crisis. Of course, because there's not a real definition of what is synthetic data according to the regulations. We are more going for functional definitions where we try to describe synthetic data based on what they try to achieve or what actually based on technical or people in the field try to express is advantageous. So without losing any time, I will start with the GDPR. One of my favorite books when I started working on this question was from Khaled El-Imam, and in that book he explained something really interesting, which is called the privacy utility trade-off. And I think it's something that we all know, and I knew that even before going through this theory or this paradox. The more we will try to make the data evade from privacy considerations, from data protection laws, the more, at least according to the trade-off, we will lose the utility. And I was like, damn, it's really relevant for our field, because based on the current, at least before the SRB case law, we were going, and I don't know if it was real, but we were going for a more absolute a way or absolute anonymization where we need to prove that there's risk zero, which I strongly disagree. And I think yesterday we had a lot of people disagreeing also with that. And then something which is really interesting is not so much about whether you can or you can't synthesize the data. It's about if you need it actually. And this is another interesting presentation that I followed. Teresa Stadler, she's working on that, and she made a presentation in front of the European Commission, I think 2 years ago, when the European Commission was starting to, being interested on the topic. And it's obviously, I think it's published and open access online. And she explained that the context matters, and this morning and yesterday we discussed about that. The context matters, but also the evaluation. We need to test it. We need to make sure that it would fit our future use. Of course, using synthesized data for open data is, very difficult than using it in the more controlled space. So I think these are my really startup points for the GDPR, and now I'm really looking forward to EDPB, because I need the EDPB to react and to take the consequences of everything that happened, of every discussion, of the SRB cases, of the fact that now we need to apply a risk-based approach on anonymization. Now we need to consider that if the risk of re-identification is sufficiently low and sufficiently, framed with appropriate measures, we can aim for anonymization. So I will wait for these guidelines with a particular attention. So the problem of the GDPR, and the challenge is really to see if we can consider that synthetic data is actually anonymized or not at all, and you will see why for me this question is fundamental in other regulations, sorry. Now we go on CTR, MDR. Of course, I'm also working on that. I'm interested in medical research, so I was like, okay, what blocks the authorities from approving research or potentially blocked authorities from approving research based on synthetic data? So I found this interesting paper from the European Medicine Agency where they recognize that synthetic data can be in some cases be useful for expanding the training data set. It's about data augmentation, right? And I think most of the people in the field are interested about that. They are like, okay, maybe the research I'm doing involves raw data, how to complete the data set to be able to have enough proof, for the study to be conducted and the result to be validated. But there's also a part regarding this which concerns data protection. Because if you think about medical research, most of the time, at least from my experience, I will have a sponsor in the US or in China. I will have a CRO in the EU, but affiliate in several countries. I will have the trial site in the EU, and I will be like, oh, I need to ensure compliance with data transfer. But then I will say, okay, imagine that the data is evade from the GDPR. No GDPR, no data transfer rules. We are okay. So one of the aim for synthetic data also is to avoid the burden of legislation. So I was thinking that if we cannot qualify synthetic data under data protection legislation, how can we comply with the confidentiality and the data protection requirement when it comes to submit projects, submit medical device? So those are linked. And I'm not the one saying this. In the review of machine learning application or AI applications in medicine life cycle, they made it clear one of the risks and the biggest limitation of the adoption of synthetic data concerns if those data are in fact anonymous. So if there is a risk of being able to re-identify an individual from synthetic data set, the advantage of synthetic data are compromised. And it's funny because this, I think it was this morning or yesterday, I don't remember, in a panel regarding how the HDAB will anonymize synthetic data, a lady said that we don't even know what is pseudonymization and what is anonymization. So if you don't know that as a sponsor, how to demonstrate and to prove that in front of health authorities, quite difficult, right? So I think it's linked and it's key. Now let's go to the AI Act. AI Act will probably apply if your synthetic data is intended to be used for medical device development, because you know that your medical device will be a high-risk AI system if it falls under the clinical trial, under the medical device regulation. So for sure, you will need to comply with some obligations specifically regarding data and data governance for high-risk AI system, which is the Article 10 of the AI Act. And I found something really interesting, an exception to the prohibition of processing health data defined in Article 9 of the GDPR. And that exception says that if you want to ensure bias detection and to correct them, you can process health data, but for that you need to make sure that you cannot correct those bias based on older type of data, such as synthetic or anonymized data. And I was like, for me, it's a clear presumption that synthetic data escape from personal data definitions. Otherwise, they will not say, oh, you can process health data and comply with GDPR, including Article 89, I think 89, the article concerning additional safeguard if you want to use data for scientific research. Thank you. And they say that, and then they say, oh, but for that, you need to prove that you cannot rely on anonymized or synthetic data. So for me, it's clear. So in one way, we have the GDPR rules that says you have a compass to determine if data is anonymous or not. So based on what you have in place, based on the concept, you can push the compass more to anonymization, or you can keep the compass and say, oh, data are potentially identifiable. And then you have another legislation saying that if you can demonstrate that you can rely on synthetic data, you cannot process health data. So synthetic data is press anonymous. That's quite, for me, it's strange. And the same interpretation goes also for the EHGS. As you may know, there is that joint action from TEDAS, and they issued a lot of draft guidelines that will be supported, and if successful, will be, I think, adopted, if I can say this, by the Commission to support the EHGS implementation. And they provided a definition of synthetic data generation, and they say that it creates an entirely new artificial data set that mimic the statistical properties and relationship found in the original data without containing any actual personal information. Okay, so basically, if the synthetic data cannot achieve this result, it's not a synthetic data, but then what it is the pseudonymized data. I feel like we are just creating categories of data, and it will be more and more difficult for us to put what we have in those categories. So that's why I'm really a huge fan of that idea of continuum of re-identification or continuum of identification, meaning that you have your data, you make your assessment as we discussed yesterday, and then based on the result of the assessment, you know where to put your data, and you continue that assessment to make sure that this result is maintained, through all the process. So I found also interesting that in the EHGS they have few roles for synthetic data. The first role is that they consider it as a magnificent tool to describe catalogs, to describe the data that are available. And I think it's interesting because it will enhance data minimization, and it will make sure that by describing the data set that they have, the data holders will not give too much context or too much information about who are the actual data subject considered. So I think it's interesting. The second use is about the secure processing environment. As we already discussed yesterday, the plan is to use synthetic data or anonymized data to make sure that no personal data actually is download from the secure processing environment. And from what I saw in the guidelines, it will be a collective effort from the data holder, the EHDPC, so the hard data access body, and the data user. So data holder will work on data minimization, with the data, with the catalog, making sure that not too much data are provided. Then the EHDPC will be the one, assessing with the contribution, of course, of the data holding data user. And at the end of the day, the data user will guarantee that when exporting the result, he will not combine, for example, or make further assessment that may lead to a re-identification. For me, at least at this moment, I had the first look on the guidance, and the good news is that sponsors will, if sponsors apply like as a data user, he will not be the one responsible directly to perform the assessment. So I was really happy because that now it will be the HDAB leading the process. So show us what to do. We were struggling with that long times ago. So now show us. But what I'm missing in this is that how those data will coexist with the older data, because the data user will have an obligation to make available the results of the data. Those results are supposed to be anonymized or synthesized. So for me, it will be a coexistence between all those data, which brings us to a data quality question. And for the moment, I don't have any issue on how we can assess the data quality when it comes to synthetic data. Who will be responsible for that and how? And again, if those data based on the EU GDPR cannot be anonymized, it will put more risk on the data subject, because we will download statistic and result, synthesize it. Based on the GDPR application, we will find that there is a certain risk of re-identification that the HDB didn't consider because they have a different definition of what is synthesized data in the guidance. So it's too, what next? And to conclude, as I said, all those recent EU regulations built upon the GDPR, they all say that no, this is without prejudice to the GDPR. For the agencies, for example, they say we do not intend to suppress all the data sharing or data reuse initiative based on the EU GDPR. We just want to avoid inconsistency and fragmentation. So if we cannot align on metrics, on a threshold, on a way to assess re-identification based on the GDPR for synthetic data, how can we, use this interesting type of data in all the legislation that I have presented? So that's the main point, and I hope it will give a bit of flavor for the discussion. Thank you.
It's got a red light, doesn't mean it's on. Hello? All right, projection. Winnie, thank you for your insights. Really interesting to do a deep dive as to what the regulatory tapestry says about synthetic data, some of the ramifications that we see before us. And certainly it was pinging neurons with my own exposure to synthetic data through the work we're doing. But Peter, you had some insights into synthetic data use within research projects. So if you'd like to take the stand again, that would be lovely. That way at least we can hear you. Hang on. Oh, that's working now. Great.
Okay. Yeah,
well, you can stay there.
I was about to say, they probably turned this one off. I was terribly keen to switch chairs, so you realise I had moved between the two sessions. I thought you might have thought I was just squatting, taking up space. So again, I suppose my starting point with synthetic data was this UK government department that collected primary care data. So it collected it already in a pseudonymized format, and it re-pseudonymized and did further de-identification so it could be used for various research projects, academic, commercial, and otherwise. But we started getting requests for people wanting to experiment with AI tools, machine learning tools. Some of the requests showed they really didn't understand what the hell they were doing, but that wasn't my job to throw it out on scientific grounds. I was just fulfilling the DPL role. But I thought if they don't even know how to spell the technique they're using, it doesn't give me a great hope for what they're doing. But anyway, a bad proposal wasn't the key question. The key question is, could we find some way of sharing data more readily? Because quite often people needed to test the tools. They weren't necessarily drawing any conclusions. So the test was, could they produce something that ran and produced what looked like meaningful numbers out of what looked like meaningful data? And lo and behold, synthetic data seemed to be a very good approach to this. That we weren't sure whether we'd need to vet who we let have access to it, but let's at the first stage start producing it. Now, when I say that we didn't include me to start off with. So it was actually our research department went off and produced the synthetic data. They used machine learning methods to generate it. So it was a pretty high fidelity replication in very statistical sense of the original data that we had and we would normally share. What they did do was also do what they called sort of close match removal. So if anything looked as though it might be one of the original records, they took it out. And then they told me about it. And I was saying, why did you do that? I mean, that's another topic we can come back to. But anyway, so they produced this stuff, and they'd really gone pretty overboard on trying to make sure there was zero privacy risk as they saw it. Now that they're designed in terms of the range of fields they chose, if I remember correctly, was mainly about lung cancer. I don't know whether they had quite a lot of requests in that area. So it immediately raised the question, the synthetic data generated, you've got the question of what was your starting point, what methods have you used to generate it, where are you hoping to use it? And then there was also the question, which we only got round to later, was what controls should we put on this data? Should we just publish it on the website on the basis it wasn't even personal data, so there was no restrictions? As a government department, that might scare the wits out of everyone who didn't really know what synthetic data was, so perhaps that wasn't a good idea. We'd invested quite a bit of time and effort, so perhaps we should have a fee for it, really, because if we'd use public money to generate it, we should get something back. And if we hope to develop on it further, perhaps produce sets for different areas, then again, a source of, I can't quite say funding, but at least reimbursement for costs would be quite a good idea. Anyway, that went, and it was, so I'm not going to get into the technicalities, mainly because the techniques of machine learning are a bit beyond me. I'm a bit too long in the tooth for that. So anyone here who knows about it, I'll bow to your superior knowledge. But in many ways, we decided the best thing to do was treat it very much in the same way as we would our normal data. We still couldn't be sure there might not be ways of reverse engineering it. Particularly, it was the type of thing, if AI can create it, I'm not comfortable using AI, but it makes for a better soundbite at the moment. If AI can generate it, perhaps AI could reverse it as well. So it was much easier to say, okay, we will only share it where it seems to serve some better purpose. For someone who's just messing around, we won't share it. So there was some limitation, but the whole idea was you didn't necessarily have to be producing something where you were going to save the world at the end of it. As long as it was, broadly speaking, for research, we could lower quite a few of the barriers. Now, I was with this government department as sort of DPO for about 4 years. And afterwards, they produced another data set, synthetic data set, as they called it, which was for COPD, coronary obstructive pulmonary disease. So slightly different fields, slightly different choice of tones and what was there. However, this one, they decided they weren't going to use machine learning. They effectively took the standard data set and applied perturbation to it, so that they felt that this was at a level that it was now anonymized. And so they actually called it a low-fidelity data set because they couldn't be sure of quite how badly they'd perturbed it. I'm not sure how they did the, if you like, recital 26 reasonably likely test. I wasn't there to take part. Apart from, to me, this is not synthetic data. You've started with real data, you've de-identified it or pseudonymized it in GDPR terms. I regret that use of a term, but anyway, that's how it's defined. And they're now claiming it's anonymous, which it might well be. But that, to me, is not synthetic. You haven't created it ab initio. And I suppose, for me, the simplest sort of example of synthetic data was one, goodness, I must have used back in the sort of 70s almost, where you take a statistical list of first names, take a statistical list of last names, with random numbers, you generate people's names. You know, this is partly for testing in computer systems that it can cope with someone with a very long names. And of course, back in those days, having 20 characters for a name was quite a lot. So, yeah, I mean, these days, it's absolutely nothing. But yeah, in those days, it was quite a bit. And clearly, using that technique, randomly, as long as you've got a reasonable set, you're bound to produce somebody's name. I mean, John Smith or David Jones, if you're in Wales, is bound to come out if you've got about 20 people. You know, it's the classic problem of here, there'll be probably at least 2 people who share the same birthday in a year. You know, I mean, that's easy to prove. Well, it's not absolutely guaranteed. There aren't enough of us. You know, we could all have different ones, but it's pretty damn likely. So you can generate data that might reproduce a real case, but that doesn't make it a real case. It's just a coincidence, which is, you know, it happens in fiction. You know, the characters in this book are fictional. You know, they are made up. There are plenty of books where, yes, they're fictional. I mean, Gilly Cooper, a well-known writer in the UK, died recently, and it was fairly clear that people who knew Gilly knew who some of the people might have been, or at least attributed to it. You know, I'm not sure it was a precise caricature, but it was anyway. So, you know, coincidence is possible, but as far as I'm concerned, the key thing is, are you generating a record set almost ab initio? Yes, you're using population information by whatever means you've gleaned it, whether it's machine learning, purely statistics, or whatever. Because the key thing is, can you generate an arbitrary number of records? Now, if you're using real data, you've got to choose. You can have multiple copies to get up to big numbers, or you can choose to leave some out. But initially, if you like, you've got 100,000 records, you've got to decide what to do with it. Whereas synthetic data, you should be able to just say, I've got an algorithm, I want 150,012, oh, there it is. So I hold that that is not personal data. Even if it looks like it, even if, as you'd expect statistically, I mean, it might be fairly remotely, it should produce something that looks like real data. And you might even find one that you think is real data, but you can't be sure it is actually real. Or Xavier Xanadu, to use my first example, might be a real person, but just because you see the record doesn't mean that they exist or it's got anything to do with it. So that was one point. So I think that first, synthetic data does not include de-identifying real data. And the other one is I don't see there's any need to remove close matches, partly because if you can imagine you generated umpteen squillion records, at the same time removing data, you'd almost have little black holes in the data. And then that's where I would have thought you could use AI to find those holes and say, there's a hole here, there must have been the data that looked like this. Hence, that must be a real person. So I actually think the technique, theoretically at least, increases the privacy risk rather than reduces it. But I think more importantly with all of this is, what are we trying to do with the synthetic data? It is synthetic. It's not real data. Now, certainly, as I used the example, it's very used for system testing or module testing in IT terms. And certainly, it was some work I did with the UK National Programme for IT, was looking at what we used for test data. And it was clear we shouldn't use anything from real data, real people, patient data, if we're just testing a small module, because it probably doesn't test it enough. You've got to test it with really extreme values to make sure it doesn't fall over in an ungainly way. But as you go through bringing components together and putting a system together, you start needing to have something that is like real data. Synthetic data would fit that. And finally, the ultimate test is you've got to load up the system, the new system, load up all the old data, and check it works. So in the final test, you've got to have real data. And that's not, well, I mean, you could, to some degree, generate random names and things like that if you're worried about it. But that shouldn't be very material. So I think the key question is, there's no doubt synthetic data is useful for testing things. But I'm not so sure it's actually any use for deducing things. I think if you've got high fidelity, you can start saying, I can deduce there's something worth looking at here. I can see there's a correlation, but I can't be accurate enough to prove the correlation. So if it turns out 90% of people with blonde hair die from some obscure disease but would never notice before, you'd say, well, that's something worth looking at. So you are getting something meaningful, but you wouldn't necessarily say everyone with blonde hair should now panic. I think you'd want to look at it in case there was some sort of bias or something introduced. So that really was my take on it. It's very much about where you start, what methods are being used, what controls you should have in place, and really, what are we trying to do with it? Because there's no point sort of saying we can draw deductions if we were starting from a bad position in the first place.
Peter, thank you for your insights. The reality of generating the data sets is always something that sheds a particularly helpful light on how to interpret regulation. But the reality as well is that we're not fully aware of what synthetic data actually is. We don't have the definition. And we do have cases where people are applying the term, but there's more nuance to it for sure. And I think from, oh, Mats, you want, actually, happy to take questions now. Do you have a question, Mats?
Yes, I have.
Try to trip over again.
This is really intriguing topic, I would say. I mean, for one, in my view, if, as you say, Peter, synthetic data is synthetic. It is, in that case, it's not derived from real health data. For me, so in that case, it's really sort of the legal and the regulatory boundaries is a little bit shaky. So, but my question is, I know, especially now when it comes to the exploding abilities with machine learning and AI tools and so on, that they are using synthetic data to reduce bias.
Mats, you're drifting.
Right. So reducing bias in AI modeling, especially healthcare. So what is the right balance? What is the right balance between data privacy and model validity? In other words, the purpose for using this synthetic data. I see there are two cases here, and it might be a third one, a surreal one. First one, all right, so has the synthetic data been used deriving and manipulating original health data? In that case, I think it's straight on. But if it is, as you were saying, it's completely constructed by artificial. So how to do that? And the third case is a little bit in forensic, where they do fathom images. Could purely synthetic data being de-identified, so unintentionally people could be recognized by that synthetic data? I know, sort of, I don't know if that makes sense, but I think this is a really intriguing topic.
Were you going to answer that, Dipak?
No, I've taken less steps than Nathan today.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to look after the mic. He's still running the show. Oh, sorry, then I'll give it to you.
We'll take that. And then.
Yeah, I mean, adding on what Mats just said, I mean, I think there are, my view, I mean, there are 2 points. One is how the synthetic data have been created. I mean, what is the starting point? So it's a real data set, because synthetic data, they have to mimic real patterns. I mean, in the end, otherwise they are completely useless. And but after that, I think they are created through machine learning, AI, or all the rest. In my view, I mean, I was trying to find a definition when you were discussing about where to classify the data. In the end, if they are not related to the original data, are perfect dummy data. In the end. To replicate a sort of standard pattern to be used for analyze some disease or any other stuff. I see more the point on the original, the starting point, so the critical point. So what data is used in order to teach the data to replicate the real patterns. Otherwise, I mean, it's like combining first name and last name, as you said. I mean, it's an easy process, and they're not data, they're not personal data. Fully agree with you. So it's, I mean, based on what you say.
It is personal data, because there probably is a Xavier Xanadu, so it must be.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, the logic is if I write here on a paper a name and another, first name and last name, it's a name, but it's not a personal data related to a person. And but the logic is the starting point, in my view, which data is used to train. I mean, to create the data. After that, if data is not used and not linked, it's really a fake of those patterns. I mean, we could say that they are really perfect, fantastic dummy data in the end. But I mean, maybe it's really a level point.
Yeah, I can maybe try to answer, because for me, there's two things. First thing, scientific data is not necessarily derived from real data. During my research, I found that, I mean, they don't necessarily agree on the industry regarding the classification and the names. Some researchers say that synthetic data is what has been described today. Like, for example, you will try to extract some statistics from real data, and you will create new data set, or, for example, digital twins with those statistics. Some others prefer to say that this is part of artificial data, and then synthetic data should not be constructed based on real data. Like, for example, I've followed a project from Google where they will use, when, for example, you are typing and the automatic corrector try to guess the next answer and stuff like that. For example, they are developing a project with that, but this is not based on people or on individuals. It just takes, some statistic about what is the potential next word that will happen if I type this, and then they consider it's also synthetic data. So it's not necessarily coming from an individual. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the issue for me with synthetic data is really about how we have been defining personal information or personal data in a specific regulations or in a specific region. You see, the case that we discussed yesterday about SRB, it was about opinion of individual. So let's say I just write something about this event on the paper, but we consider that it could be personal data because at some point we could merge that opinion with someone and find that it was the opinion of that person. And I will link that to what you just said when you were presenting. You said that when AI is used to generate synthetic data, for me that's where the risk of re-identification links, because if to generate synthetic data you have filled the AI tool with real data, some authors consider that you may find some patterns of the real individual in the AI generator. And if, for example, you are able to say that this pattern or this information, that will probably, because you say that even if it results in a person, there's no assurance that it's an actual person. But if you have that, and you have other means to have access to other data that you can merge, then there is a risk. So that's the position of some authors, like, for example, Yves Alexandre de Montjoie, which is kind of really working on questions of re-identification through reverse engineering, but that's another topic, of course, but yeah.
I was only going to say on that point of generating, there was a project, well, I'm still involved in the project, but I was on the ethics board, and the question came up of getting access to test data. So this was purely for testing the system. There was no social risk, so we weren't getting into that side of AI risk. But they had 10 consented cases. And of course, to test it, they needed sort of 10,000. So they were talking about using AI to generate 10,000 cases. Now, if you're only starting from 10, and it's known you're starting from 10, then you're quite right. Some of the patterns might be discernible. Mm-hmm. Even if the pattern is discernible, how do you know whose pattern it is if you don't know the people? So there's a question of, you may do as the GDPR does, single out a case, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can identify them. I mean, if you can't single them out, you can't identify them. That's quite good. But so you might be able to pick something out. So I would say that's not a good starting point. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming we've got big enough data sets where there's something you can generate with a meaningful level of variability, because 5 or 10, why are we even worrying about it? I mean, you can't do much useful with 5 or 10 cases.
And my question stands, where is the demarcation line?
Just one sec, Matt, so Dipak will pass you there.
Yeah, so, yes, my point. Where is the demarcation line between privacy and what I call, in general terms, model validity? In other words, in order for this data to make sense for its purpose?
Yeah, I'm going to break your question down into two parts. Because for me, if we're talking about what I would call synthetic data, e.g. not de-identified data, I would say straight off, privacy doesn't come into it because it's not personal data. It's been generated, synthetic data, end of story. Your second question is a bit more about usability. what is it good for? And there I must confess to being cynical. I'm not sure it's useful for a lot of things. Yeah. It's very useful for testing. Whether that's for training AI is a different question. I would be hesitant with those. But at the first stage, at least you can show whether your AI model is worth having, because it seems to generate meaningful answers, even if they're wrong meaningful answers. You know, it's not coming up with complete mush. So I don't think there's the trade-off. So in that sense, I wouldn't agree. It's a very useful concept for real data pseudonymization.
Yeah, I have a question that I would like for you to comment about. So I have great faith in the potential of synthetic data in medical care. And so synthetic data, the work definition is data that is not observed but produced. And here the dimension of high fidelity, low fidelity, I think is very important, because high fidelity might not be the goal. When you have high fidelity, you have a privacy issue, because high fidelity means that the data might be able to replicate exactly personal data, and then you have an issue. But with low fidelity data that replies to your research question, we might have very interesting data sets. From my perspective, and there is a case where X-rays were produced by adding noise with one technology and then removing the noise with another technology, and hundreds of synthetic X-rays were produced to train medical students in heart and lung diseases. Which is very interesting. It's not actually a medical question, but this data set was very, very, very useful. So I would like for you to comment on this dimension of high fidelity, low fidelity, because low fidelity data may actually be very, very useful. Synthetic data, low fidelity synthetic data is what I mean. Thank you.
I can start, but I think you have a good answer about it. But I think we definitely have a problem of definition again, because based on what you said, for you, real synthetic data, you don't have the question of confidentiality. And if you don't have the question of confidentiality, you don't have the issue of high fidelity equal privacy, for example, or low fidelity equal no privacy. That's the interpretation I will have if I follow you. And then you have, in another place, people saying that if I use personal data to generate synthetic data, and I can have some pattern of those data in my result, I may end up being in an issue with data protection legislation regarding privacy. So for me, and my own question for my PhD would be, is it because you can identify an individual from the data that it is personal information of someone? Like, for example, if you can extract, or if you can find that, okay, in my synthetic data, I can identify someone of this age with this specific pattern, and I'm not able to link that images, that description, to an actual trial participant. Am I in front of personal data? Personally, I would say yes, because personal data is data that leads to identify directly, but also indirectly. So if I have some element and some patterns that may lead to, build a profile of someone, that may help in combination of other data to identify an actual participant to my project, indirect identification. So I think there's a real debate here about what is synthetic data. Can we define what has been described by you as synthetic data for real? Based on your information, I would say no.
I think we got several things here. Like, what do we mean by fidelity? So if you're saying 100% fidelity means we reproduce the original data set exactly, well, that's a test beyond what I'm envisaging. For me, high fidelity means that the data set generated bears a fairly strong resemblance at a population level, so statistically, to the original data set. Not that it reproduces each bump and twist exactly. But I must confess, I don't know of any actual numerical test for fidelity. I think it's generally, we use this and we think it's going, and we then run some statistics and it looks quite good. And if we do it this way, we know it's quite bad. But they're probably talking between sort of 90% fidelity and 85% or 70% fidelity. So it's almost more a flag. The low fidelity is saying, I wouldn't draw too many conclusions from this, but I'd use it for testing. The other question you raised about the images, I would say what you said is you took images, they were mushed up and then used, and you can unmush them. No surprise as far as I'm concerned. That's why the data was de-identified, not synthetic. So if you generated one that looked like it, and it happened to look very like it, then that would be good. Incidentally, one of the first things I came across of de-identifying image data was the E. Diamond study in Oxford, which was taking mammography studies. And what they'd realized, of course, so I'm not a great expert on this, but sizes vary, and at the extremes it can be possibly more notable about the size of the mammography. So they were asked to recalibrate it to produce almost a standard size and shape to avoid re-identification. And actually they found that that gave a better resolution when analyzing the image for possible cancers. So sometimes de-identification can actually help the fidelity. But that's because that's not synthetic data, that's using real data, but just using it better. Sorry.
And I was just going to add a point as well on this. We are running a bit out of time, but we've got time for 2, possibly 3 more questions. We'll do it super quick. So on this point about fidelity, studies that we've been involved with projects, Synthema and Cynthia, they're using clinicians to validate these synthetic data outputs and compare them to real records to give a sense of fidelity. So that's probably about as close as we've got to a numeric sense of fidelity, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that area that they're looking at the moment. We'll take a question from you if we don't mind.
I don't share your opinion and your regret that synthetic data are not defined in the texts. For myself, think that the strength of a text is that it gives principles, and the legal regulation with such an ambition should not go into technical details, and for me synthetic data is a technique and not a legal qualification. So I think we should be very happy, because as you already used so many different terms to describe that different transformations. So just imagine if the word synthetic data was in the GDPR, because now you have artificial data, generated data. I mean, this is not good, and we should not define this at the legal level, because we have the tools through pseudonymization or anonymization to discuss. These data have been going through a process. Let's describe this process, let's evaluate this process, and find where it fits in the legal framework. So I really wouldn't go into defining synthetic data, because this will change all the time.
That's funny because I agree. No, that's funny because I agree. The point is not to define synthetic data in the GDPR. The goal is to provide a kind of way to evaluate those data, to see if they are anonymous. Because in the field now, companies generating those data sell this to sponsors and to customers by saying that it evades from data protection legislation. That's the top one reason when they sell this. So we just want to know if it is efficient.
I think we already have the tools. I mean, we have all the tools we need. There are a lot of people say that a lot of firms are selling software saying, oh, look, I'm doing synthetic data. This is anonymized data. So this is not true, because this is, you have to, each time you do it, because when you use a software, you have thresholds. You choose the values for the distance from the original data set. So it's up to you to do the work. And I think that we can't escape this. Whatever we do, we can't escape having to do this analysis. That will depend also greatly on the context. For example, I would not say that synthetic data are not personal data, because you have other information. For example, if it's my institute that gives and says, oh, look, these are synthetic data, you have so many informations, contextual but informations, because we know we specialize in this disease, we know the French, and we know that there are many contextual aspects that you know.
You have to. Yeah, absolutely. You have to take it on a case-by-case basis. Lady at the back, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I'm actually a data scientist and I produce synthetic data. I think I'm a bit the odd one out here in this audience. But I'm a researcher and I'm producing synthetic data and then I'm adding, for example, differential privacy. And then I'm saying, okay, my epsilon is below 0.1. I'm like super happy. It is protecting the privacy. I go to the DPO, I'm telling, hey, my epsilon is below 0.1, please can you sign off on it? I'm super excited about it. And the DPO looks at me like, huh, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you mean. And then we end up with this, a certain gap between what I technologically can deliver and then what the law people, you, how we can best collaborate. And I'm still a bit searching for do we need standardization? What actions do we need to take so that I know as a technical person how I can prove that it's safe to use?
So, 3-word answers each. Challenge.
I think for me, for example, is take what is already available. For example, recently I saw that there is a guidance from the NIST that tries to explain what are the parameters we can use to to evaluate the efficiency of statistic data. And two authorities, so two data protection authorities have issued guidance on statistic data. You have one from Singapore, one from South Korea, and recently one from Ontario, so 3, not 2. Thank you. So you can have a look and see how they approach this from a legal point of view.
I'd be delighted.
That's
to hear what you say.
That was 4 words.
If I could just say as well, just before you start, you've written yourself a script to write a little online training module for this academy. Haven't you? To train the DPOs so that they better understand what you tell them.
There we are.
We'll tell Pierre-Yves.
This is Xiao from URTC. I have a relatively naive question. So we are talking a lot about privacy regarding synthetic data, but I'm also thinking about ethic issues. And my worry is always that by doing this, may we also replicate or amplify the bias and the quality of synthetic data. It does rely a lot on the original data you're using. So I'm wondering if you can elaborate a bit more on ethic governance in this topic.
Do you want to answer briefly and then
No, go on.
Okay, I'll take this one, then we'll wrap it up. So this is really important to bear in mind. The projects that we're working on, the hope is that synthetic data can replace control arms in trials one day, once they reach sufficient fidelity. And one thing that we're bearing in mind is that in order to do that, especially in the rare disease cohorts, the reality is there's no question. Personal data, special category data for a small and sometimes vulnerable cohort is being processed. There's no ifs or buts. This has required ethical approval at all the sites and an independent ethical advisory boards to oversee how that's happening. The generation of the data needs to be governed in the same way when it boils down to it, especially when you're going into the stage of trying to train algorithms where there is just a total lack of data, and it's so important to bear that in mind. The risk of bias is significant, though, because very often these are populations that are in the minority. And that's where it is susceptible to bias, reuse issues, and bias in the data generation as well. So in that context, those ethical concerns remain. So with these use cases, really the focus has to be on the highest standards of ethics, the highest standards of data protection. This is not entailing developing data from the absolute outset. This is about using real data that has to be very realistic if we're to hope to bring up to speed the research and the medical intervention development for these rare disease cohorts as well. So that remains true across all cohorts, but particularly for those specific areas. And that's why you can't promise total anonymity, total synthetic data generation. There is always going to be an essence of the original experience in that synthetic data. On that note, I'm afraid we must wrap up. I want to give you all a comfort break before the next session starts in 3 minutes, but I don't think it's going to start in 3 minutes. Thank you to the panelists and for all my meanness as well. I think we're reconvening in here shortly, but I think you've got time to take a break, maybe grab a coffee, I don't know.
No.
Oh, you don't? Okay,
No.
I'll shut up.
No, you had your coffee break. As far as I know, you had a coffee break before this session. Your caffeine levels are sky high and there's nothing exciting out there anyway. We will be starting, but we'll give you 2 or 3 minutes. That means you can run to a very little room if you need to run to a little room. But we're not going to have a proper break. The first speaker is just about to connect remotely, so we'll be ready with you, very shortly. This is not an official break, it's an emergency stop only.
Human rights.
Okay. That's all right. Well, that's why I was hovering.
No, good idea. Thank you.
Okay. Make your Friday. Just relax. Okay, sounds frightening. Can I just do a sound test for Sofia? Are you there and can you hear us? or can you hear me? Actually, maybe we can't hear Sophia because we're hearing music.
I have the mic on.
Oh, can you hear me, Sophia?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
I can. I'm just
Oh,
going to
that's great.
I'm just going to walk to the door and yell to anybody who's still outside that it's too late and they better come in fast. So you take a deep breath and then I'll introduce you.
Perfect.
Okay, everybody, please settle down. We're going to start this session. You still need a little energy, so please don't feel that this is the end of your brain time for today. We've had a lot of discussions about AI and its hunger for data, and whether we can make sure that the data that might be available for AI training is GDPR acceptable and so on. But in this session, we want to look at the other end of the journey. What if, by happy chance, AI has been developed and it complies with all of the acts and regulations it's supposed to, and it starts to travel on its journey towards real people who might use it? And we want to look at that for this session here. I'm delighted to welcome as the first speaker Sofia PALMIERI, who is formerly from our institute, but actually we haven't really let her go because she's gone off to Boston, to Harvard, and to pursue an appointment there for a couple of years. But we never really let her go. We're a bit like Hotel California. You can check out, but you can never leave. Sophia, you've checked out, but you can't leave, as you well know. And we're delighted to have you now talking us through some interesting ideas that you've had and work you've been doing on how we can get to really good quality deployment of AI. And I'm just going to inform the audience that Sophia has a technology limitation, which is our end, not her end, which is that she can hear this microphone in front of me, and we can hear her, and she hopefully can even see her own slides, which is very helpful. But she may not be able to hear those microphones. So we are going to allow Sophia to go from her presentation into an audience-led Q&A, where I will ask my colleagues to run with the microphones, and I will repeat your questions to Sophia so she hears them. And when we've finished that, we'll invite Tom to come and give the second talk, and then we'll move into a discussion, which I will handle in a smart way that you'll discover in a moment. So with that, Sophia, the floor is yours. We are on your title slide. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can.
Good.
And I might even be able to hear people in the room, which is great.
Well, that'll be even better. So let's test that out after your presentation.
Of course. Yeah. So I'm very happy to join you today. I'm sorry I'm not there to benefit from the amazing views in Paris and from the networking event in general. But I'm very happy I have the chance anyway to present the work that we at IHD we did in the last year or so with regard to AI adoption. Well, I will have to ask Dipak every now and then to click on my slides. And if you see me looking sideways, it's because I'm trying to see them a bit bigger on my screen. So I'll click first. So I'll invite Dipak to click as well. Great. So when I think about AI adoption in general, I have multiple phases of AI lifecycle in mind. And stepping out of the development phase, I'm starting to think about purchasing and wiring up the system. But most importantly, at least for me, and most interestingly, I think about deployment and the subject to which that AI system is used upon. So what I will focus on today is actually the work that IHD has done with regard to AI literacy, or in general about how to make competent deployers of AI systems. And this matched perfectly the desiderata, the aim of the AI Act, of which I will shortly talk about in a while, and to see exactly how to make and how to facilitate the creation of competent deployers. Oh, that's way better. Now I can see the slides a bit bigger. What we have done in IHD, the work we have done so far, is actually creating some literacy pathways in a way to empower the deployer of artificial intelligence, which in our scenarios are mostly healthcare professionals, and also how to facilitate transparency and information sharing. So without further ado, I will say that today I want to talk about AI literacy. And since I have a legal background, I cannot talk about this without diving a bit deeper in Article 4 of the AI Act. And I want to see together how we can develop and implement Article 4 of the AI Act, which specify AI literacy in a healthcare organization. So Article 4 of the AI Act, just very briefly, I'm not going to go into legal boring thing. Just provide an article that states that providers and deployers of artificial intelligence should always take measures to ensure that the people actually using the AI have the skills and the knowledge to do so trustworthily, just to put it simply, in a way that inspires trust. So when we check the definition of AI literacy given by the AI Act, it doesn't specify much of what those skills and knowledges are, but it just says that they are supposed to help deployers and affected person in understanding a bit better what AI is. And it should be developed, this AI literacy, in a way that mirrors the actual capabilities of the people we are speaking about, or the actual task that the person is called to perform with the AI system. So when we check who bears the obligation, so who's supposed to help the deployer in developing those AI literacy skills, we talk about providers and deployers. So most of the time in the healthcare systems, we are thinking about healthcare institutions who should somehow help the deployers, so the staff, in general, the clinical staff, but also people more in generally dealing with the operation and use of artificial intelligence to develop these skills. When it comes to the content of the obligation, it doesn't also clearly specify which kind of competencies should be provided, but more in general, it just says, as we mentioned a minute ago, that this should mirror the expectable skills that somebody should have when when using artificial intelligence, and considering the group of people on which that AI system should be used. This is still, we might skip these slides. It's not particularly relevant, so I'll click again. Perfect. No, sorry, go back. Okay, objectives of AI literacy. That's great. So I think we should focus a bit on why it's important AI literacy for AI adoption. And this ensemble of recitals help us to understand that. So in general, AI literacy would help us to further integrate AI into our healthcare systems in a way that our deployers are actually more trustworthy, in a way that inspires trust on the subject on which the AI is used upon, but also in a way that inspire them to use more appropriately that AI system in a more competent way, and therefore facilitating and somehow fighting the resistance that healthcare professional might have on using artificial intelligence. So click. When we think about Article 4 in general, what do we have to remember? Can you check? Oh, perfect. We just need to ensure from the healthcare institution point of view a sufficient level of AI literacy. So minimum requirements. It's not really specified yet what that means, but it's certainly required from the healthcare institution to help developing this package of skills. So what we did with EHD, click, is actually thinking about to who do we have to apply this in a hospital institution. And we map all the stakeholders and all the actors on which this obligation might apply. And of course, we focus very much on clinicians and healthcare professionals, but more in general, I want you to remember that this kind of obligation applies also to admin staff, IT, whoever works with artificial intelligence and is called to have this very basic amount of skills. And literacy, according to this article, as we just mentioned, is not a package, a fixed package of skills and knowledges that everybody horizontally should have, but should rather be something that we decline and we develop in a way that is appropriate to the skills and to the use that actually that deployer is doing of artificial intelligence. So click. We started from the Bloom's taxonomy of educational objectives, and we sort of took inspiration from one existing publication in the field that was already conceptualizing AI literacy thanks to this taxonomy. And so we kind of theorized that, as mentioned, we should develop information packages or skills packages, knowledge packages that kind of grow depending on the kind of use somebody's do of artificial intelligence within a healthcare institution. So if we click further, we developed a modular and certified literacy framework that somehow builds a core module, a shared module with basic skills and understanding of artificial intelligence that is dedicated to all the different actors that we can speak about in a healthcare institution, but at the same time that then becomes deeper and deeper depending on the actual tasks. And we will see it in the next slide. So in the next slide, we divided into, so click, with tracks of different actors in the healthcare institution. We divided into IT professional, healthcare professionals, and legal or administrative stuff. And we sort of theorized which are the technical skills or the AI skills that everybody needs in this environment. This is something that is still in development, of course, also because we're kind of, not to brag, but we are kind of the first to try to do this. So it's still very much in development. And also we want to work on a validation process for this literacy framework. But how to implement this framework, we will see it in the next slide. So in the next slide, we see that we try to elaborate some expected competencies for each of the boxes and for each of the skills level that we developed into the framework, and also competency indicators that if we click again on the slide, we see appearing. So for example, we can describe a first level of AI technical skills for IT people as being able to describe supervised or unsupervised learning. And therefore we are developing some potential technical quizzes to check whether that expected level of competencies has been satisfied. Well, you might think that this is quite far-reaching, and this is also very hard to implement in a hospital settings. Well, we thought about it too. So we go to the next slide. And this is the second proposal we elaborated with IHD, and is the AI fact sheet for healthcare professionals. How does it differ from the framework we just spoke about? Well, it's something completely different. While the framework is something that we would ask a healthcare institution to implement and to actually habilitate in their settings, and they should provide to their workers, the AI fact sheet is actually something that is developed and filled in by developers. So if we go to the next slide, we will see what it might look like. So the fact sheet is just a document with some pre-filled titles that might indicate some relevant information for our deployer, in this case, a healthcare professional. But we might envision that different kind of actors might actually benefit from this kind of document. And therefore, just to present the kind of content that we envisioned as possible, we go to the next slide. And we will see that we have almost 10 points of potential content that we still need to validate. But we might direct healthcare professionals to be better users, better deployers of artificial intelligence, and helping AI adoption through a set of knowledges, a set of information that foster transparency. So we have, for example, the health and healthcare objective of the AI system that we are discussing in the fact sheet, the data used for development and validation, data quality and data bias, the level of the automation of that AI system, so how much we need to supervise and which are the safeguards that we can enforce, the evidence of effectiveness of safety and of the usage of that artificial intelligence, the approval obtained for the jurisdiction in which that AI is used, the technical adoption guidelines, and the clinical usage guidelines, and then some disclaimers, just because I have a legal background and I love disclaimers. In the last slides, well, I want to say, why is this relevant? Of course, we are very passionate about this fact sheet, and we want to bring it forward, and we want to elaborate one also for other actors that might benefit from this kind of information. Well, this is relevant for multiple reasons beside our passion, right? So one of them is the fact that it would help fulfilling AI literacy through information sharing. Maybe we cannot enforce the framework of AI literacy that we spoke about a while ago, but we can still try to foster this information sharing that would help eventually build up AI literacy bit by bit. At the same time, would help develop competent oversights. Professor Goffin in a while will talk about oversighting and human in the loop. So thanks to this kind of information sharing, we might have actually somebody oversighting the AI system that have the information, that have the basic competencies to trustworthily overlook over the AI system. And then we might help favoring the transparency between the developer and the deployer, because sometimes the two words, when we're not talking about in-house devices, might live completely separately. And lastly, which I think is incredibly important, is to facilitate patient and physician information and interaction. So picture that you visit your healthcare professional of trust, and you want some information on the artificial intelligence that is used upon you, whether you know that, just in case you know that an AI system is used, the physician might not always have the competencies to explain how the AI system works. And this fact sheet might actually help to facilitate the interaction. But I might disclose that we are also working, well, Dipak is working on a fact sheet for patients, but this might be something in between that foster the relation between healthcare professional and patient. Well, if you are, Click, as passionate as we are of this fact sheet, you might want to contribute in the validation of this fact sheet. And this will happen at our conference happening in early December. You will see here the banner, and I'm sure Dipak will tell you more in a while. There we plan to run a sort of validation in which everybody can chip in and help us determine if the titles and the the content of our fact sheet is actually of value, and if we are missing something. So you are very, very welcome to join us there and help us validate this fact sheet. I think that's all from my side. I think I'm even over time, so I'm sorry about that. And you can always reach out. I will click again. And you can always reach out in case you want to chip in on our work. Thank you.
Sofia, thank you very much. So, as I said, because we have some audio uncertainties, we're going to allow a few moments to take a few questions. So if you want to raise a hand, Nathan is kindly going to run with the microphone. I mean,
thank you, Nathan.
Are there...
Welcome.
Do you feel comfortable that the Act places obligations on healthcare organisations to look after the capabilities and competencies of the staff who will in some way touch or plug in the AI? Do you feel that a competency framework that may be eventually mapped to educational resources, training resources, would be a good way forward? Did you like the stuff that Sofia was explaining is the direction of travel? And do you think a fact sheet acts as a nice bridge between the developer, the clinician, the developer, the clinician, and the patient? Again, work in progress, but what are your feelings? Are you welcome to ask her clarification questions or to express an opinion and a view?
Absolutely, do so.
Does anybody feel like raising a hand? Does anybody have enough caffeine from the non-coffee break that you had? Okay, there's actually a pair of people next to each other there. Thank you, Nathan.
Hi, thank you for your very interesting presentation, and I thought it was very insightful. I was wanting to...
Can I just stop you there?
Yeah.
Sorry. Sofia, could you hear any of that?
Absolutely, that was perfect.
Oh, wow. Okay, carry on.
So, in the Netherlands, there's an initiative called DigiZo, and it's even, I think, more elaborate. But then it also touches on MDR and ISO and other standards, and collecting all that information from suppliers, and which could help them bring their product easier to the market. And they then also advertise on their platform which suppliers have managed to fulfill the whole set of questions. So it may be interesting to get into touch with that initiative.
Of course. Yeah, that's incredibly interesting, because we tried while developing the fact sheet to look into all the requirements of various regulations, so also the MDR and the GDPR, on which other colleagues in IHD are working right now. So we tried to gather them all, but for sure it might be incredibly interesting to have a real running example of something of the sort.
Yeah, whereby I must say that your example seemed to show that the data was brought into in a connected overview, whereas their format, as I've reviewed it, was more like a list. So in that sense, I think some both could really benefit getting into touch. Yeah.
Okay, could you repeat maybe very briefly the name of the initiative so I will note it down?
Yes, it's DigiZo. But I'm pronouncing it Dutch because it's Dutch. Well, but maybe I'll send you an email.
Oh, that will be very much appreciated. Otherwise, I'll ask some Dutch co-workers to help me with that. Thank you so much for your question.
Any more questions? Here we go.
This is not a question, it's to answer. I think you're totally right. We need to train many people, and thank you very much for this initiative and the way you're handling it. In France, there are programs, and university have been charged with providing AI programs for medical practitioners, but I don't think many of them will go through it. So the simplicity of these fact sheets may be a very, very important aspect because, I mean...
Okay. Oh, thank you. We need encouraging words. So thank you very much for that.
Okay, I'll take one more question if there is, but otherwise we'll move on to Tom.
Or an answer.
Of course, I can now. Actually, I should do this, then I can actually see you. Yeah. Okay, Tom, are you handy? Oh, there you are. Great. Okay. So, Sophia, we're kind of hoping the sound is going to be better than I feared. So do stay online in case, as we move into more discussion, you can actually hear what we're saying.
I will. Thank you very much, and good luck, Tom.
Thank you. Do you need good luck? No, I don't think so. Sophia, sorry. We think he's pretty... He's okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Tom Goffin. I'm a professor in health law at Ghent University. And in Ghent, I'm part of Metamedica. I'm not sure whether you can see our logo yet. No, you're still waiting for it to be projected on the big screen, but I'll do my introduction already. So part of Metamedica, Metamedica is actually an interdisciplinary research group focusing on the ethical and legal aspects of digital and technological innovations in healthcare, inter alia artificial intelligence. Just a little disclaimer, although I have a legal background, I'm not an expert in privacy law. So if you have any questions related to privacy and health, I'm not the person to reach out to, but within our Metamedica group, we do have another expert on health privacy law, Giet Verhenneman. So if you need any help with health privacy related questions, you can certainly reach out to her. She's a professor in health privacy law, and she was the DPO of one of the big university hospitals in Belgium, so she has quite a lot of experience in it. That is a brief introduction. I want to discuss with you in this, I assume, last presentation of today, the question whether we will need an AI protection officer, or whatever you call it, in order to ensure human oversight and also in order to comply with the provisions in the AI Act related to human oversight. When we're discussing human oversight within the broad field of AI and the regulations that were developed based on AI in Europe, it's not something that comes up, it came already up quite early in the discussions, actually. In the ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI developed by the high-level expert group, you can already see that they developed some kind of key requirements. And if it works, it works. And one of them is human agency and oversight. So already in the early documents related to how can we ensure a trustworthy AI in Europe, it was already mentioned as the first key requirement that we should have human oversight. So therefore, it's not really surprising that if we then look at the AI Act itself, also human oversight is mentioned on several occasions, actually on two sides, on the side of the provider, but also on the side of the deployer. I will briefly go into detail on both sides, but mostly focusing on the deployer side in order to answer the question whether we need some kind of new person to guide us through this human oversight position, and perhaps whether a DPO is suitable to take up this job. So first of all, Article 14, just to mention, perhaps for those of you who do not know the Act in detail, although human oversight is overall the general theme, human-centric approach is a general theme in the AI Act, there's no clear definition or specific requirement of who should take up this human oversight. Do we need an AI officer or similar? So it is mentioned that AI governance is crucial in order to create this sufficient human oversight, but how? That is not detailed in the AI Act itself. So it is mentioned that it should be some kind of dedicated AI governance as a best practice recommendation, but there's no clear legal compulsion, but rather an intention recommendation to make such a strategic and operational choice in order for the institutions to have sufficient oversight. So if you look at the AI Act, as you might know, it is a risk-based approach that is taken in the AI Act with 4 different types of AI, forbidden AI that is simply not allowed within the internal market of the EU, high-risk AI, limited risk AI, and minimal risk AI. If we talk about the requirements that needs to be fulfilled within the AI Act, it's mostly about the high-risk AI. And within these requirements, you see them, several of them are mentioned on the slides. In order for a provider to put an AI system on the market, they should provide some kind of management system in order to monitor, to evaluate, etc. the AI system. They should take care of data quality so that the system is trained on relevant data. They should have a lot of technical documentation in order for deployers and users of AI to know really what the technical issues of the AI system are. They should have some kind of system of automated recording of logs so that deployers, once again, can use this to log the AI system through its life cycle. They should have transparency issues as well as an instruction for use in detail so that we know when we're using AI what it was intended for and really to describe what the intended purpose of the AI system in development was. They should also provide appropriate level of accuracy, robustness, and cybersecurity, but above all, they need to guarantee requirements regarding human oversight. If you look at the recital of the AI Act with regard to human oversight, and now the screen in front of me becomes very small and still is quite big for you. I'm just going to adapt myself a bit so that I can read myself as well. It is mentioned, and I did highlight some parts, that it should be developed by the provider so that natural persons can oversee their functioning, ensure that they are used as intended, that the impacts are addressed over the system's life cycle, etc., etc. And also, so the natural persons to whom the oversight has been assigned have the necessary competence, training, and authority to carry out their role. And inter alia, to guide and inform natural person to whom human oversight has been assigned in order for them also to be able to stop the AI system if needed. So basically, 4 key requirements in order for the provider to have sufficiently taken measures for human oversight. First of all, they must enable properly understanding of the system's capacity, limitation, in order for it to duly monitor its operations and detected anomalies. They must also make deployers be aware of the possible tendency to over-rely on the system's outputs and correctly interpret the system's outputs. Thirdly, they must be able, so the deployers must be able, based on the measures taken by the providers, to decide not to use the AI system, to override it or even reverse it. And finally, they need to take measures in order for the deployers to intervene in the operation or even interrupt through a stop button if needed, if risks happen in the use of AI. So quite a long list of provisions with regard to human oversight. And actually, if you look at the different requirements in general that a provider needs to take care of in order for them to put the AI system on the market, they somehow come all down to this concept of human oversight. So if we look at how the AI Act deals with human oversight, it's all pretty much comes down to these measures of human oversight, since we really distrust full AI autonomy, and therefore a human control should be established through the entire life cycle of AI if it could be placed on the market and if it should be AI compliant. So therefore, the question, of course, then raises, okay, we do have these requirements with regard to human oversight within the AI Act, so let's hope that the legislator also stipulated what or who is this human overseer that needs to take up these requirements with regard to human oversight. But actually, the AI Act doesn't go into detail on that. It only mentions that it should not be a passive monitor, but rather somebody with really empowered possibilities, who is a critical interventionist, who really can take up the role that he has been dedicated to. So therefore, we can question, okay, if this is the case, if it's really this active role that somebody has to play or an institution has to play, how can we then qualify this human overseer? And if you look at literature, actually different approaches come up. You see, for example, human in the loop. In a human in the loop, the person is capable of intervening in every decision cycle, guide, or validate output before it can take effect. We also see the concept of human on the loop, in which there's an intervenence during the decision phase and monitor systems operations with the ability, once again, to take over at any moments. And then we have, finally, a human in command, overseeing and controlling the overall activity of an AI system and deciding when, who, and how to use a system in a particular situation. You can wonder, if you look at these three types of human overseers, which one is the most compatible with the Article 14 of the AI Act? And actually the answer is the three of them. It really depends on the AI system. And it also depends on how will we comply with these measures with regard to human oversight. So there's really no one size fits all. And actually you can also see this further in literature, since these three are not the only three that are mentioned. You can also read things about the human backing control, the human reviewer, the human designer, in which the human is intervening from the first phase of the development of the AI tool until the real deployment. So several approaches are taken in literature besides the human in the loop, human on the loop, and human in command. Even a different approach is the one on first degree and second degree oversight, in which the first degree oversight is really taking on the oversight during the life cycle of AI, really intervening, whereas the second degree oversight is more about qualifying and validating the effects, the outcomes of an AI system. So basically, everything is possible. But there's no clear requirements for the provider to decide on the correct type of human oversight. So who decides then on which type of human oversight should be provided, should be used by the deployer him or herself? So it's quite an intensive and quite big responsibility for the deployer to choose how these human oversight measures, as stipulated by the providers, are then being implemented in real-life practice, whether a human in the loop is sufficient, whether a human in command is necessary, etc., etc. So if we then flip to the other side, the deployer's side, Article 26, and once again, there's the recital of the AI Act on the top, once again focusing on the essence of human oversight, also from the deployer side. And we really see, if we look into detail on this, that the deployer side with regard to human oversight is really a translation of the AI measures, the requirements on human oversight from the side of the provider. And therefore, it becomes clear that it's really about the accountability of utilizing and implementing the tools, informations, and features provided to ensure meaningful human control. So really about translating the measures of human oversight as provided by the provider during the development phase of the AI tool. And human control, human oversight, it's much more than just looking over the shoulder of the AI tool itself. It's really about operational responsibility, including clinical and legal expertise. It's also about procedural safeguards, like administrative stuff and technical overview in order for it to really be an AI governance. So AI human oversight is not just about checking a box. It's really about creating some kind of policy and AI governance in which human oversight is really effective. If we then look at different conditions of human oversight as stipulated in the AI Act, we see, and I stipulated the Article 26.5 on top of the slide, that according to the AI Act, deployers shall assign human oversight to natural persons who have the necessary competence, training, and authority, as well as the necessary support. What does this mean? First of all, the necessary competence and training. We already heard Sofia's presentation on AI literacy. This is pretty much it. It's much more than just a standard medical education. It's much more than just the basic software training. It's not sufficient that we can use PowerPoint to say we're AI literate. We have sufficient AI literacy. No, it goes much further. It's really about combining traditional medical training with technical and conceptual knowledge about the AI system. So. But of course, also in that regard, one of the questions is, when do we have sufficient AI literacy? We do already have the fact sheets as developed by IHD, but still then, whether we have sufficient AI literacy will also depend on the type of human oversight. If you are just a human in the loop, it will have less consequences regarding AI literacy than when it comes to human in command. So once again, there's no one size fits all. It's really depending on how we will interpret human oversight for a concrete AI system that we know how far this AI literacy will reach. So it's really the deployer's responsibility. If he doesn't take up this responsibility sufficiently, it can cause problems. So therefore, hospitals need to design, implement, and document formal training programs to oversee high-risk AI systems. And perhaps there's a need for some kind of AI clinical educator, somebody who oversees the different training programs that are needed in order for really to guarantee this AI literacy, in order to guarantee the necessary competence and training as provided by Article 26 of the AI Act. Second condition, authority, and I think this is a crucial one. It's not sufficient to know the system, to have sufficient competency with regard to what the AI system is really about, but also have the authority to intervene when it's needed. So human overseers really should critically and potentially challenging the organizational mandate have in order for them to really override the AI system if needed. So therefore, we need to take it one step further and really empower clinicians. They should be able to disregard, override, and reverse AI systems output based on their professional autonomy. So it's really about concrete authority, not just some vague concept, but really concrete authority to override the system if needed. So in order for clinicians and others to do so, there's, according to me, also a need for a clinician governance policy. Why? Since we need to support these persons. We need to support them and ensure them that they can override the system, that they not feel pressured if they defer to the AI system. So really, authority should be a real authority and not some vague term. Third, necessary support. We need necessary resources if we want to comply with Article 26 of the AI Act and ensure sufficient human oversight. And that means that the financial resources should be there in the first place to really implement these measures. And that means also allocating time in schedules for diligent review, providing access to necessary data and performance dashboards, ensuring that institutional culture values and protects the role of human oversight. Only when we create on a hospital or institutional level this necessary support, only then human oversight be implemented on an effective way. So once again, a clinical governance structure is needed to create this necessary support. If we then look at the different tasks of human oversight based on the AI Act, there are several, 4 to be exact. First of all, the human oversighter must use accordingly, must check whether the use is according to the instructions of use, or better, whether the AI system is used according to the intended purpose of the AI system as provided by the provider of the AI system. And this can be quite problematic in healthcare, since, of course, if you have some kind of instructions of use as provided by the provider, and this conflicts with your personal professional reasoning on the situation of a specific patient, yeah, this can quite conflict. You can have or a deviation from the AI's instruction for use, which means a breach of the AI Act, or you can have an adherence to AI's instruction for use, which probably means a medical negligence. So the question is, how can we tackle this? And once again, there's no clear answer in the AI Act, of course, so we need to provide the answers ourselves, which means, once again, creating new things like internal protocols that govern and document justifications for any deviation. Second, input data governance. The human overseer should ensure that the input data is relevant and sufficiently representative in view of the intended use of the AI system, which basically means combating algorithmic bias. So it comes to the human overseer to avoid that the AI system's performance degrade or produces discriminatory outcomes if the data of real-world clinical settings differ from the data it was trained on. You can then wonder which human oversighter can take on this role. Perhaps a DPO, I don't know. Perhaps a data access committee or somebody else. But once again, we need some kind of new role within this human overseer role, which is some kind of clinical data quality or bias auditor, which I think doesn't exist in most clinical settings today. Third, we need to monitor incident reports and suspend if needed, which once again needs this kind of authority. There should be an effective reporting channels within hospitals, which basically don't exist today, to really report these findings. And if we look at the AI Act and how it's being defined there, apparently there's a threshold, and the threshold is reason to consider a risk. So every reason to consider a risk should be reported. But of course, when is something a risk and when not, that's not really clearly defined within the AI Act, so therefore we need, once again, an extra implementation tool. And which implementation tool? We can use the Fundamental Rights Impact Assessment tool that is developed within the AI Act. But then, once again, the question is posed, who can perform this Fundamental Rights Impact Assessment test? Is that something that can be done by a DPO, or do we need somebody else to take on this role? So once again, it comes down to a proactive governance duty in order to really effectively take on this task of monitoring, incident reporting, and suspension. So therefore, once again, new measures, extra measures needs to be taken in order for this human oversight to be effective. And fourth, I already mentioned one of the requirements of the provider was to create some kind of system of log keeping. Of course, this means for the deployers that they shall need to do this log keeping, which once again needs new infrastructures with regard to IT. Also, this is something that needs to be provided and for which human oversight is needed. So, to bring me back to the question, do we need some kind of AI protection officer, or can we just rely on the DPO? These were the requirements with regard to human oversight: training, log keeping, monitoring, suspension of use, using according to the intended use, incident reporting, and etc., etc. So quite a lot and quite diverse. And you can wonder whether it can fit within the already broad tasks and responsibility of a DPO. I think we should really take it one step further and say we just need some kind of AI governance system in which we perhaps can introduce a role of an artificial intelligence protection officer. Not only him or her, but also with a broader committee, since if you look at all these requirements and how they should be implemented on the deployer side, it really takes much more than one person to take up this job, since it's such a diverse specialty that needs to be taken into consideration in order for it to really be sufficient human oversight. AI Governance Committee, okay. Which composition? Certainly somebody with clinical leadership should be in it. An IT and data science specialist should be in it. The DPO, of course. Somebody with a legal background, since, of course, when it comes to AI governance committees within healthcare, we also need to take into account medical device regulations and other relevant regulations within the healthcare domain. We should involve somebody with an expertise in ethics and, of course, patients' advocacy. That's not all. If we create such an AI governance committee, it should also be clear that this committee has a clear mandate. Once again, authority is crucial in this. If this committee has no clear mandate but just an advisory function, it will not be sufficient. Can the DPO take up certain of these tasks? Certainly. There's certainly a synergy and overlapping skill if you look at the list. We can do some leveraging of existing frameworks. There is certainly an inextricable link to personal data. So yes, the DPO can take up some parts of this, but certainly not all. And also, if you take a look at Article 38.6 of the GDPR, indeed, the DPO may perform other tasks and duties, but the organization must ensure that any of such tasks and duties do not result in a conflict of interest. So if you involve a DPO in this AI committee, and if you let them really take part in the design process, in the procurement process, in the deployment process of AI systems, they are involved too much to then effectively and independently, for example, do a data protection impact assessment on the concrete use of the AI system. So there's your conflict of interest. So it's really problematic in the current situation that DPOs take up this role, this AI protection officer's role, in a too broad sense. So back to the AI governance committees. There are several. Once again, there's no one size fits all. We need to see how AI systems are being used in hospitals. We need to check which risks appear when we really want to use the AI systems. And based on this, we need to create some kind of committee, AI officer whatsoever, with a specific responsibility, with a specific authority, with a specific knowledge on AI, in order for it to be the human in control. Thank you for your attention.
Tom, thank you. That's lovely. Would you care to sit down? And can I ask Nathan and Petra to join me? We're now going to shift into a bit of a panel, but I would like to first ask these two who have kindly offered to strengthen our team here, because Adriana, who is listed on the programme, unfortunately is unwell and not able to join us even remotely. So Nathan and Petra, in either order, first thing is, would you like to just kick us off with a kind of response, reaction, tell us how you disagree totally, and or the opposite. Please, who wants to go? Well, it looks like you're going to go first, Petra. You look poised.
That's only because Nathan's terribly well brought up.
Thank you, Nathan, for being so well brought up.
So first of all, thank you so much to both Sofia, if you're still there, and Tom for some great presentations that I think really set the scene excellently on what an incredibly difficult time we have ahead of us in terms of regulating the use of AI in healthcare settings, and not only regulating it, but regulating it in a supportive and constructive manner. To go back to a point that I tried to make yesterday, to move away from this sort of the law says no, the computer says no approach to the law is there to facilitate and enable. And I think we can do that, and it might be through the kind of role that you just described. One of the things that I would like to do is just make the mix even more complicated You mentioned, Tom, when you were ending, that there are other things to take care of as well, such as the medical devices regulation. And I think one of the things that we really need to be aware of is that whether we're talking about the GDPR, the MDR, the AI Act, the Data Governance Act, we have a propensity in this legislation to use the same words to mean different things. And a particularly difficult, or if you like, high-risk word is the word risk. Because risk is described differently in GDPR, MDR, and AI, just to put those three on the table. In each three of those pieces of legislation, the deployer and provider are expected to avoid risk. But risk is not constructed in the same way. And I'm not going to go into a long exposition on how it's different in the different legislation. Some of you will have ideas, and even if you haven't, obviously when you're using a medical device, you're thinking very much about the potential clinical harm that can arise, whereas when you're talking about GDPR, you're talking about the harm that can arise from a data breach. And we've never really talked about the harm that can arise from not using data, but that's also where AI begins to come in. But what that means is that we really need additional tools to support the implementation of those legislations. And we've had two really excellent suggestions. We've had the kind of fact sheets and guidance and support to education that Sofia set out. We've had, Tom, your presentation about an AI oversight body, an AI oversight person. And I have to say to you, I was writing some notes and I stopped listening attentively, and you talked about an AI educator, and what my ears heard was an AI alligator. And I actually thought that's what we really need. We need something in the corner ready to bite. But we might not get an AI alligator. The thing that I wanted to add on top of this, which is sort of foreseen in all of the legislation, but not really there yet, is proper codes of conduct that can complement things like the tasks and roles of the sort of committee you described or the officer you described, that can guide the sort of fact sheets that Sofia described, but that can really build on the high-level code of conduct that the high-level expert group developed, but do that at a much more organic, real and level within each hospital or within each setting, so that it doesn't feel like an alien top-down thing, but something that's co-created with the clinicians, with the IT staff, with the patient representatives, a code of conduct that really builds that trust to let people feel that, if you like, there is somebody minding the alligator in the corner and that it isn't going to come and gobble up everything. So that was my reaction to what you said, and now you've got the nightmare of the alligator to deal with.
Okay. Thank you, Petra,
Thank you.
including the alligator. Nathan.
My instant reaction after hearing the two talks was how I wish we had this a decade ago. The AI processing, some of my clinical colleagues called it advanced analytics back in 2016, 2017, when they were starting to look at using high-performance computing, GPUs, to construct models that could help them better predict who was likely to show up to an appointment, for example. And they were able to secure funding to purchase the computing. And these weren't cheap. They were £250,000 for the GPU alone back then. And the thing that struck us from the regulatory perspective was, well, hold on a minute. How do we know this is safe? This is something that's being deployed in a small environment, sure, but where is the basis upon which we judge the risk on this? You know, just the clinical risk, let alone any of the other risks. And around that time, we were, picking up Petra's point, we were looking at the data protection compliance risks that the new legislation was bringing in, which was slightly different to the information security risks that we were already quite well versed in well-provisioned NHS trusts dealing with. And not all NHS trusts were well-provisioned, as we saw with the WannaCry incident. So hearing this now, I think we managed to cope with it quite well and engaged as best we could. We had to answer to our patient communities and so forth. And one thing that was clear, though, was that the regulatory teams were overwhelmed. And when I heard about the DPO taking on the role of the AI protection officer as well, potentially, I thought, not a chance, frankly. It's just too much to do already. It's certainly a complementary role, but the points that Tom was making about conflict of interest were particularly important. And earlier today, we had reference to the way that English and British generally organisations, public sector organisations, manage information risk more broadly, which is a good umbrella term for at least the GDPR compliance risks, the information security risks, and increasingly, I suspect, the AI risks as well from an information perspective at the very least, before we get to the deployment. And there were two senior roles within government departments, including NHS trusts. One was the senior information risk owner, who we talked about. The other was the Caldecott Guardian. So the senior information risk owner, as the name suggests, dealt with information risk and was responsible for them, and was a C-level executive who had to be obeyed when it came down to it. The Caldecott Guardian was supporting, a parallel role, but from a clinical perspective, similarly senior, but looked at the conscience of the organisation, steeped in the medical profession's lawful duties and ethical duties. So they complement each other very well in the healthcare setting. So increasingly thinking about this, the DPO would answer to the CSIRO and the Caldecott Guardian. An AI protection officer must fit into a similar setup within a larger organisation, without doubt. So it's about anticipating those risks and addressing the alligator in the room. But there's a clinical aspect to this as well in terms of the use of the interventions and so forth. So that's where I think we need to do a bit of work as well to ensure the clinical community is supported by this. And 2 weeks ago, I was speaking at an Economist Impact session on the trustworthiness in health data sharing. And the thing I kept saying was that from the clinical community, our clinicians don't feel empowered. They feel beaten into a corner because they think AI is going to take over. They don't feel they can speak up and stand by their own professional judgment. The same is true for our medical students. They're not being trained to question, which is absolutely vital. And when it boils down to it as well, we keep seeing from the patient perspective inequity in healthcare, in effect, because people don't know what questions to ask. Now, when it comes down to it, the floodgates for AI use in health need to bear these issues in mind as well. And within the risk structure, we need to bear that in mind too. And going back to my initial example, we had to fly by night a little bit in terms of regulating people wanting to explore advanced analytics in the healthcare context. We went back to what we knew well in terms of medical device regulations as they were, data protection regulations as they were changing, but also duties of confidence, which have been around since the Hippocratic Oath was first agreed, whenever it was, about nearly 2,000 years ago. So on that basis, we had a solid grounding, but now we really do need to address issues around oversight, issues around human involvement, but also empowering not only our medical professionals, nurses and allied health professionals, but also the people whom we're caring for to be able to look at this transparently. So I think we're off to, you've articulated it so well, Tom, in your talk. You've churned out something that's so much more understandable and conceptually palatable from the wording of the regulation and the realpolitik of trying to implement it. So thank you for doing that. I think we're at a really exciting stage now to start pushing some policy development and managing the risks more effectively.
Great, thank you very much. Do you want to react to their reactions before the audience is probably also keen to us?
I just want to share my biggest fear with regard to human oversight, if I can. Yeah, it's linked to the alligator, actually. Why are we afraid of alligators? When an alligator is here in front of us, I hope there's a big sense of urgency to get out of the room. With regard to the GDPR, when it was enforced, when it was implemented, there was a big sense of urgency to really get onto it, to really do stuff with it. I really don't feel the same sense of urgency when it comes to the AI Act. So although I'm stipulating that we need some kind of AI committee and it should be different than the DPO, and there really should be some kind of support, financial support, resources, that there really should be some authority in order for the human oversight really to be effective, I'm afraid. I'm afraid that due to the fact that there's generally no sense of urgency with regard to the implementation of the AI Act, that hospitals will say, why should we take care of it? Why do we need to put money in another committee? Why do we need to put money in more expertise with regard to AI? It's something that we can just look through our fingers and see it passes by. And so that's one of my biggest fears when it comes to human oversight.
Very understood. I'm going to steal your microphone, hoping that two gentlemen will give you a microphone when you need, and turn to the audience. Really, I think we're looking here at an issue of organizational readiness for AI, capacity planning for AI, and as Tom just hinted, maybe saying the GDPR came in, not you then started to collect data. You already had data and the rules changed, you had no choice. AI may not be hitting you heavily right now, so why should you bother? And the answer is, when it does hit you heavily, you'll be caught seriously unprepared. So how do you feel about, really the whole session has been about organizational readiness and methods and ways of getting people on board, getting systems understood, having a process of governance, a human and organizational process of governance to make sure that as AI stealthily grows in your organization, you're not caught with a disaster for which you're totally unplanned. Okay, I see a hand up there. I'm going to do my best to do some running, and if anybody feels brave, they can give me a hand if I'm too slow.
Thank you. I have a question. I don't fully understand yet how to combine general purpose AI with high-risk AI. So I was thinking, if you're using it as a transcript tool, it's going to probably also suggest things, and then you run into also the high-purpose AI, because it will be a medical device. So how then to ensure this human oversight, and especially, tracking the input data and everything that's involved with a large language model. And in combination, I'm then thinking about like nursing homes, care provision to handicapped people long term. They're also in homes, because we're talking about hospitals, and you're talking about a new committee being set up. And for a hospital, it's already a huge effort. But how are these people in nursing homes and other care provisions going to institute such a committee?
I think you're only adding to my fear. Yes, in hospitals we do have some kind of governance system, so we can rely on that one to take on this role. But for other healthcare institutions, the problem is even big, or perhaps even bigger, since they can rely on this already existing governance structure or less. So, but they also will have to comply with it. So we will have to find ways to solve it for them as well. Perhaps through codes of conduct, such as Peter already mentioned, by really providing them with the tools they can use themselves to implement these human oversight measures. So it is difficult, and it will be difficult, but if we continue to ignore it, the problem will only get bigger and bigger and bigger, I'm afraid. With regard to your first question, Gen AI and LLM models, I think to add perhaps one additional task to the ones that I already mentioned on my slides, the first step is really seeing what's happening within our institution, what's happening within our hospital, which AI are we using already, and the role of the human oversighter on the side of the employer will also be analyzing those AI systems that are being used and linking them to the specific risk clause within the AI Act. And it's not because something is perhaps is today not a high risk AI that it can be tomorrow have become a high risk AI. So there should be a continuous monitoring of the systems and seeing whether at a certain point the minimal risk becomes a higher risk, and therefore all these measures should also be implemented. So it's for me also one of the tasks of the deployer when it comes to human oversight to really create some kind of system to monitor the AI systems within the institution and to classify them on a continuous way within the different risk classes of the AI Act.
Very good. Let's move on. Let's keep a bit of pace. Matt, please.
All right. So a reflection. I embarked on a book project 2 years ago and had the privilege to interview several of you. What reflects, I mean, I'm a supporter, subscriber of the importance of having AI literacy and governance. What strikes me after 2 years is one single word, and that is speed. The speed that this technology is progressing. And therefore, I just would like to have your reflection about this fantastic and in some way alarming speed, how things progress. And therefore, I just would like to say that, yes, these governance aspect and literacy and these steps are definitely important.
Thank you. Maybe all four of you need to respond to the question of how do we catalyze accelerated change here? Sophia, are you still there and are you listening, or are you feeling that you've been unable to hear? We don't know. Maybe. I did give Sophia permission to disconnect if the whole thing became inaudible to her. So there's a risk that Sophia's gone because she couldn't hear anything.
No, actually I'm here. I don't know if you can hear me. Like I'm like a spirit, yeah.
Okay, so look, if you've heard it, Mats has thrown a question on the table, which was really triggered by the prior interactions. There is an urgency for action, but a risk of complacency. What do we do to catalyze accelerated response to the kind of things this panel's been raising?
That's a hard question, and Mats know that. So
well, he is like that. Yeah, he asks hard questions.
I think for me, but this is more my personal opinion that matches my professional one, I would say, is that we should bring together people from different environments. So I believe in the strong power of roundtables, for example, because we can discuss it between us, but without meeting the people that can enable different kind of solution from different fields of expertise, I think we are just running in a circle. So we all have brilliant ideas coming from our field of expertise, but we need the people that can help us enact them. And they might be from different angles and different areas of expertise. So I would say, again, meeting people, enabling exchange from different stakeholders. That's my first reaction, which is fairly a very simple one. It's nothing brilliant.
Well, all ideas are needed, so that's great. Does anybody want to go first, out of the three of you here?
Yeah, I think I partly already provided the answer to this question from my side. I think this and coming on to Sophia, this interdisciplinary approach of this AI committee is crucial. Why? Not only because of the interdisciplinary aspects of it, but also because two people know more than one. So if we can add the expertise from different approaches, perhaps we can tackle this fast-moving evolution of AI in some way. Building on that, and making reference to one of the previous presentations, actually, I don't know who was saying that. It was about synthetic data, I think, that they were saying like we can use one tool and combine it with another tool and thereby make it more acceptable to say, yes, it is safe to use these synthetic data. Perhaps this is something also that we can do. We do have AI tools. If we only use one AI tool, we can start to get blind for the confirmation biases that come out of this AI tool. But if we combine the outcomes of different AI tools and we trigger AI tools to each other, perhaps it can also add to this complexity and this quickly evolving process of AI.
That's very interesting. Okay.
I fully agree with what you've both said. The need for to multiply the brains around the table, to have different approaches, whether those brains are human brains or artificial brains. Let's do that. What I would say we also need, and I think it's there in a nascent approach, which is a completely different way of thinking about lawmaking. There are plenty of people in this room who are maybe not quite as old as me, but of an age. When I learnt law, you had a law book. I did my first law degree in the days where you were expected to learn things by heart and know exactly which paragraph said what. And the exams were largely about a matter of memory, not a matter of interpretation, because it wasn't actually our job as lawyers really to interpret law. That was for the judges. Our job was to know it and make sure that the clients understood what they had to do. And European law historically has been very top-down. And we see that when we look, however, at the difference between the GDPR and the AI Act, and we see this shift towards a much more dynamic approach to law, we see the idea of legislative sandboxes, we see the building in of dynamic codes that can change, of stakeholder engagement, of groups. I think we're moving to a time where we have a new conundrum and a new challenge. Most people, when they speak to me, when I have my lawyer hat on, is they want legal certainty about what exactly can I do with AI. Just tell me yes and no and where the limit is. And legal certainty is what people crave, but in a world that is moving as fast as it is, as AI is developing, we cannot have legal certainty in that same way. So we have to have legal creativity. I think we're moving there, but it's still a bit scary and new.
Thank you. That's a nice phrase.
Absolutely. I think it's the only way to navigate these areas now, that you have a basis upon which to proceed and you feel you're in a defensible position. You can't agonize over interpretation. And I think I might disagree with one of the speakers this morning who mentioned, the law has been written, it shouldn't be changed. Forgive me if I'm misrepresenting that. But I thought, well, of course it can. That can always be reviewed and reapplied. But I think we have enough law at the moment in terms of statutes. What we don't have is confidence in using it. We don't have the precedents built up quite yet. And I still see we're trying to find where GDPR sits with other more traditional legal tooling that we have already at a national level, common law level, and so forth. So I think, as Petra says, you can't derive certainty from that. You can derive something that's defensible and pragmatic. And really, in terms of appreciating the speed at which things happen, they can go as fast as they like. You need a safe place for them to spin out of control without causing harm. And that's where you bring in the ethical considerations as well. So in terms of offering people choices this morning, yes, I think that point of enforcing choice was very well made, because law outlines choices that you may offer an individual it does not and must not impede their ability to think outside of their own box and say, actually, these choices you're offering me, I'm not happy with any of them. What do we do then? We can't say, well, the law says we can do it. No, you've lost your relationship at that point. So yes, I think things can accelerate. They can move quickly. As long as they break things in a safe environment, great. But we need to be all the richer for understanding those machinations, what the implications are when we try and apply something for real.
Peter, did you want to come back with it? Okay, we can take another couple of questions before emergency drinks take over.
This is not really a question. This is Xiao from URTC, just in response to your question before. My general feeling about this panel, great discussion, and I also want to mention, of course, we understand AI governance committee is extremely important, but we also need to address awareness. People need to know who to come to. And I do witness the fear that you mentioned, because in our organization, I'm the DPO, but I'm not in charge of the AI Act. We have another person, she's the clinical legal expert, and she's also in charge of AI Act. And I cannot count this year how many times, because in our organization we have good privacy by design culture, so I'm getting involved pretty early stage of a project. I cannot remember how many times I had to pass her a message, hey, heads up, I've heard of a project that involves the use of AI, and extreme cases, we may collaborate with some other institution to develop diagnostic AI. And every time she heard the news, I could see the fear in her eyes. When is this happening? So this is the fact, I think we also need to overcome the interactions within the organization and the role of DPO, not only to support the AI officer, but also we are a bridge.
Well, actually, that's quite a sobering, maybe even frightening thought, but I think it's a really important point you've made. Thank you very much. Would anybody else like to come in? As a hand, I see two hands right at the back. I think we might be getting close to you two being the last two. Of course, if you get our panelists drunk, then you'll get more out of them as well. I'm going to come. So,
we may not guarantee coherence, but
okay. Could you pass it along?
But collaboration.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you. I'll ask a very practical question. So it echoes the speed thing. So I think we may all think that we have a conscious choice to become or not to become developers, and when. I think it's a myth, because as you see that all softwares we are now working with, they're coming with some kind of AI features. So would your advice be to actually already start putting in place AI governance actually everywhere, at least starting the discussion, and start actually adding in our beautiful tables of all systems we use AI yes, no, kind of? Because, yeah, I think it will come and we will not have choice. We will just receive a message from one of software providers, great, we have this new feature, and then, yeah, you go.
I think the answer is yes. Perhaps we should create some kind of similar reflection as we do with regard to GDPR. So if somebody puts up a project that they think about GDPR implementation and that they also think about AI implementation or just AI governance, just the first step is about thinking how to implement AI governance. And I think if we can already accomplish this first step so that people start thinking about this governance, it's already a huge advantage in comparison with the situation today.
I also fully agree, and I think the thing we really need is somehow to really build awareness amongst people of the fact that they are consuming AI every single day already. in the olden days when I used to give presentations about the Data Protection Directive, and people thought that data protection was something that happened somewhere else, didn't have anything to do with them, I always used to ask people, who in this audience, raise your hand if you have a loyalty card of some sort in your wallet, Air Miles or whatever, and people put their hands up, and I said, right, you've all got a data protection issue on your hand right now because your data is being used for things that you almost certainly didn't read the small print on. And the thing is that AI is, every time we do a search with whichever search engine we choose to use, it has AI within it. And I have a real fear, and we're generating a lot of fear now that we are not really conscious of quite how much AI there is already around us. It isn't something that's around the corner that the AI Act can, in a half a year from now, begin to regulate, because it's here every minute already. So a wholehearted yes, but can we put it on steroids?
And I'd agree, and I'd say you're not governing it now. It's that kind of aspect, for sure. And I think, am I right in saying this? Not asking for an interpretation specifically, but I thought organisations had to ensure that their staff were competent users of AI. Is that right? Is that enforceable now?
Yeah, they should already have AI literacy, or that part is already enforced, but the human oversight measures is something that will come into force next year. Yeah. But we're at this moment, what is it, the 16th of October? So halfway 2026 is not that long anymore. So if we didn't start thinking about it yesterday, we certainly should be thinking about it today. So so I think we need indeed an AI alligator on steroids.
An even bigger one. Do you mind if I just give Sofia a few seconds to respond also? In your early slide, you had procurement as one of your icons, but what Anastasia has unfortunately revealed to us is actually the fact that it's not about a discrete procurement of a new system. It's the next upgrade to a system you've already procured. So AI coming in a little bit round, in the back door. Do you think that the approaches you described would also help with organizational readiness for that?
Absolutely. First of all, let me clarify that the AI literacy requirement is already enforced since August the 2nd, I think, of this year. So the problem is that we still just don't know how to actually enforce it. We just don't have the bodies that can actually oversight that. And also we don't really know what they should look for. So that's really complicated at the moment. It's still early stage. With regard to the procurement process, the thing is, for sure, it makes sense to have the doubts that Anastasia brought up right now. But at the same time, there is an ongoing work on considering whether when an artificial intelligence update over time, we are talking still about the same artificial intelligence or not. And I wonder if we can apply the same thread of thoughts to this problem. So, we are not really procuring any new AI system, we are just updating those that we have. I don't know, I don't really have specific thoughts on that, but I just think there is something ongoing in that regard in terms of thinking how to proceed, how to classify those AI systems that evolve, or those systems that were not AI before, but that now will become classified as such. So we should just look out for possible upcoming guidance on that, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Now listen, I need to apologize to the gentleman who has a microphone because the boss has said time up. So what I'm going to do is to ask the panel members who are in the room just to wait an extra couple of minutes as we close the session, so you can come down and ask them the question in person, and let them delay getting drunk. But you'll, sorry, I didn't tell them that was part of the job description. Can I ask you to thank the 3+1 panel members? Sofia, thank you for joining us remotely. And can I also add a thanks to the guys in the little window that you can see in the top there, because they set... Can't see you, but I hope you're there. We know you set this up for Sofia rather at short notice, and we're very grateful that it worked brilliantly. And thank you. Piri.
Thank you so much.
I just want to say a few words to close the sessions. And actually, I must say this is sometimes interesting to see. I'm between being completely overwhelmed by the complexity of what we are talking about, and tomorrow we'll talk about genetics, and we'll have another level of complexity, but also the excitement. So I'm an ecologist by training, and you study the relationship between living being and the environment, which is absolutely overwhelmingly complex. And so I feel some excitement about it, but at the same time there is this fear that was expressed also. So in order to forget this fear, I propose that we get drunk, or at least we get some we get some drinks. So the cocktail is until 2000, which is 8 p.m. And we have afterwards.
No. Oh? No. The email from Michael was what Michael said is that the time for walking off to the dinner is 7:30 to 7:45.
Yes, but he told me that the dinner was at 8:30, so we have.
Oh, we have longer. So you'll persuade him.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes,
in the end,
I have.
I'm not the boss,
Just to remind you that all the speakers, as well as people who registered for it, are invited for a dinner at Andia, and so you should have your invitation. It's 20 minutes walking, or 14 minutes by metro or bus. So, as you feel. But now I expect that most of you will be here tomorrow to have two very exciting sessions about genetics and how we manage it. Thank you very much for your...
I come from my question. So my question is a bit outside of the scope actually. So there are also, the acceleration of AI. So there is the problem of acceleration of potential AGI, and that's not a problem.